Mia Thompson woke to soft beams of sunlight slipping through her bedroom curtains. The gentle glow painted the walls in warm shades of gold, and for a moment she lay still under her cozy quilt, listening to the distant hum of morning traffic and the faint chirping of sparrows just outside her window. At 6 years old, Mia was already familiar with the early rhythms of her home, the reassuring scent of oatmeal bubbling on the stove, her mother's cheerful whistle as she prepared lunches, and the steady tick of the kitchen clock counting down to the day ahead. Sliding out of bed, Mia padded across the wooden floor in her favorite pink slippers. She tugged on a sundress patterned with tiny yellow flowers, her happy dress, as she liked to call it, before tiptoeing into the hallway. Her mother, Grace, stood at the kitchen counter chopping strawberries for Mia's breakfast. Grace's brown hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, and her soft smile welcomed Mia into the room. Each morning they shared a ritual of gentle teasing. Mia would pretend she couldn't decide which fruit she liked best, and Grace would offer both, only to giggle when Mia finally piled them high onto her oatmeal. As Mia settled into her chair, Grace pressed a small bowl of yogurt topped with honey in front of her. "Ready for your day, sweetheart?" she asked, brushing a stray curl behind Mia's ear. Mia nodded eagerly. She loved school, especially the time she spent painting at her little wooden easel in class. Today, she planned to finish a scene of rolling green hills under a big purple sky, her own version of the place she and her mother visited every Sunday for picnics. After breakfast, Mia helped Grace pack lunches into a bright red cooler bag. She carefully arranged carrot sticks, apple slices, and 2 peanut butter sandwiches, cut into perfect triangles, while Grace tucked in an ice pack and a note that read, "Have a fantastic day, I love you." Mia adored these notes. She always read them twice before zipping up the cooler. Helping her mother in these small tasks made her feel grown up, capable, and deeply connected to the woman who worked so hard to provide for them. With lunches loaded and backpacks by the door, Mia and Grace stepped out into the crisp morning air. The Thompson home sat on a quiet street in a friendly Chicago suburb, where maple trees lined each sidewalk and neighbors greeted one another by name. Across the street, Mrs. Patel was coaxing her tabby cat down from a fence, and Mr. Reynolds was watering his tulips, their bright reds and yellows nodding in the breeze. Mia waved at them both, her backpack bouncing with each excited step. "Come on, buddy," she called to her best friend, a small golden terrier mix who was already leaping around the front yard, tail wagging like a banner in the wind. Buddy belonged to their next-door neighbor, but he and Mia were inseparable. At least once a day, she visited him to share her snacks, crusts of bread or tiny bits of cheese, and to tell him stories about the great adventures they would have together. This morning was no different. Buddy yipped happily as Mia crouched down, scratched behind his ears, and whispered, "Ready for today's masterpiece?" When the school bus rounded the corner, painted bright yellow and humming softly, Mia gave Grace a quick hug. "See you at 3," she said, climbing the steps and settling into her window seat next to a classmate named Lucas. Through the glass, she watched her mother wave until the bus door closed, her heart fluttering with excitement for the day ahead. At Lincoln Park Elementary, Mia's first stop was Mrs. Delgado's classroom, a warm, colorful space filled with children's artwork, strings of paper lanterns, and rows of tiny tables. Mrs. Delgado greeted each child by name as they entered, crouching low to tie shoelaces or smooth collars. When Mia arrived, the teacher's amber eyes sparkled with welcome. "Hello, Mia," she said softly. "I love your sundress today. Did you sleep well?" Mia nodded and pointed out that she had added purple clouds to her landscape painting. Mrs. Delgado beamed. "I can't wait to see it." The morning began with circle time, where Mia and her classmates shared stories of their weekends. She listened intently as Lucas recounted a trip to the aquarium, complete with shark facts and a description of how he almost dropped his nachos. When it was Mia's turn, she stood tall and announced, "I painted a picture of the Park Hills, and Buddy chased a squirrel there." Her voice was bright and the class clapped in delight. Feeling proud, Mia returned to her seat, her mind already drifting to the afternoon's art project. After circle time came reading lessons. Mia loved books that took her to faraway places, a medieval castle, a bustling bazaar in Marrakesh, or even a gentle snow-covered village where children ice-skated on frozen ponds. She practiced sounding out new words and shared picture books with a small reading buddy, Sophia. Though Sophia was a year younger, she admired Mia's steady confidence when reading aloud. Together they whispered the tale of a friendly dragon who baked cupcakes, their heads nearly touching as they pointed at each line on the page. Before lunch, the class moved on to a short science lesson about plant life. Mia's green eyes lit up when she learned that seeds could grow into towering trees over time. She raised her hand to ask if the daisies she painted in class would ever sprout seeds themselves. Mrs. Delgado assured her they would. Mia tucked this fact away for her next painting, planning to include delicate seeds drifting in the breeze. When the bell rang for lunch, Mia joined her friends in the cafeteria. She unzipped her cooler bag to find her sandwich, fruit, and the sweet note from her mother. Carefully, she placed her lunch tray in front of Buddy. Just kidding. Buddy wasn't really in the cafeteria, but Mia liked to imagine him there, sitting politely as she shared her apple slices. She laughed at her own joke and passed the day-old story to Sophia, who giggled along. After lunch, the students had recess. Mia dashed outside to the playground where swings soared back and forth, and children played tag beneath the shadow of the big oak tree. She ran to the sandbox, where she and a few classmates built a miniature castle, complete with a moat fashioned from tiny twigs and pebbles. Buddy may not have been there, but Mia imagined he trotted alongside her, sniffing for adventurous clues. The final activity before going home was art class. Mia's table held jars of paint, bowls of water, and stacks of blank paper. She dipped her brush into violet paint and swept it in broad strokes across the sky of her landscape. Behind her, the green hills stretched in arches, each dappled with wildflowers in pink and blue. She paused to let the paint dry, then added tiny white daisies waving on slender stems. Every so often she glanced at a small photo of the real hills she and her mother visited so she could capture their rolling curves just right. As the clock ticked toward 3 o'clock, Mia signed her name at the bottom of her painting in careful bubble letters, then placed it on the drying rack. Mrs. Delgado admired her work. "You have such a gentle touch with color, Mia," she said. Mia's cheeks warmed as she accepted the compliment. She packed up her paints and brushes, humming a tune on her way to the bus. When the morning had begun, Mia could not have imagined how special today's painting would feel, or how proud her mother would be when she saw it. She hopped onto the bus, waving goodbye to her friends, and thought about the stories she would tell Grace about the daisies, the sandbox castle, and her very own purple sky. Little did she know that this ordinary day, filled with paint, puppies, and play, would be the quiet first step toward an extraordinary act of bravery that neither she nor anyone else could have predicted. Mia bounced beside her mother as they arrived at the grand hall where the charity gala was taking place. The building rose like a palace at dusk, its tall windows glowing with warm light that spilled onto the sidewalk. Inside, crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting soft rainbows across the polished marble floor. Gentle music drifted through the air, and tables draped in ivory linen displayed trays of colorful appetizers. Mia's eyes widened at the sight of sweet cherry tarts and creamy chocolate mousse, but her mother gently steered her toward a table labeled Children's Corner, where a small easel and blank canvases waited under soft lamps. Grace smiled and crouched beside Mia, adjusting her little pink dress. "Have fun, sweetheart," she said, pressing a quick kiss onto Mia's forehead before returning to the registration desk to greet arriving guests. Mia took a deep breath, soaking in the buzz of laughter and polite chatter. She set down her backpack, pulled out her favorite set of watercolors, and chose a brush with a careful sniff. She had a habit of finding the brush that felt just right. Then she dipped it into bright yellow paint, determined to capture something beautiful on her blank canvas. She began with simple strokes, painting delicate daisy petals dancing in the breeze. Every now and then, she paused to glance around the garden courtyard she could just see through the tall glass doors. Lanterns hung from the branches of small trees, and lantern shadows quivered like fireflies on the grass. Some guests wandered outside for fresh air, holding champagne flutes and talking quietly. Others posed for photographs by the fountain. where water arced gracefully before splashing into its stone basin. Mia worked steadily, lost in her own world of color and form. When she looked up, she saw a tall man in a dark suit standing by the fountain. He had neat silver hair and kind eyes framed by slender glasses. Grace had told her that he was Andrew Carlyle, the tech billionaire who made so many things that helped people, from life-saving medical devices to smart tools for schools. He seemed calm and happy, chatting with a few guests who listened attentively to his every word. As Mia mixed a soft green for the leaves of her daisies, she noticed Andrew take a sip of water from a glass held by an assistant. Moments later, the assistant suddenly looked alarmed and took a step back. Andrew's hand went to his chest and he swayed as if balance had slipped beneath him. Mia felt a flutter of concern. The paintbrush paused mid-stroke. Across the garden, people gasped and murmured. Someone shouted, "Call for help!" Time seemed to bend and stretch as Mia watched Andrew's tall frame slump against the stone bench. The sky overhead, once a comforting lavender, felt distant and hazy. Mia's fingers went cold, but inside a spark of knowing cracked through her fear. In her first aid class at school just a month ago, she had learned simple steps. Notice, if someone is breathing, call for help right away and press on their chest to keep their heart moving. Could she really do that? She closed her eyes briefly, recalling the teacher's gentle voice guiding her through the motions. She set down her paintbrush, and without thinking twice, she ran forward across the grass, her red sandals slapping softly against the damp blades. Streams of conversation parted around her, and she heard gasps and cries for an ambulance. The small cherry blossoms from nearby branches rained down like freckles around her as she reached Andrew's side. Kneeling next to him, Mia placed one hand on his forehead and the other on his chest, where the painted marble bench under his back felt cool to the touch. She whispered to herself, "Check breathing. Call for help. Press here. Smile. And call 911, she murmured, trying to remember the exact words the nurse had taught her. Then she pressed two small fingers firmly into Andrew's chest, counting each push in her mind. 1, 2, 1, 2. At first it felt strange, an odd mix of strength and gentleness. Yet she kept going, guiding her little hands to the exact spot. Her heart pounded as loud as thunder in her ears, but she held on to the certainty that every press could save a life. Behind her, a startled security guard appeared, followed by an off-duty nurse who had been enjoying a quiet moment by the fountain. The nurse knelt down and said, "Thank you, darling, keep going," and took over Mia's spot for chest compressions, closing her eyes to count rhythmically. The guard dialed 911 on his phone, speaking clearly to the dispatcher. "We have an adult male, collapsed, not breathing. Please hurry." Mia scooted back as the nurse and guard worked together, her small hands now resting in her lap, fingers trembling. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Mia's breath came in quick, trembling gasps. She watched as paramedics carrying a stretcher burst through the garden gate. With practiced ease, they assessed Andrew's condition, clipped monitors to his chest, and lifted him onto the stretcher. The nurse gave Mia's shoulder a soft squeeze and whispered, "You were very brave." Mia's eyes filled with tears, not of fear now, but of relief that help had come just in time. Grace hurried through the gates at that moment, her blouse catchingly bright against the lantern light glow. She knelt beside her daughter, pulling her into a tight hug. "Mia, what happened?" she asked, voice trembling. Mia pointed to the stretcher where Andrew lay still, eyes closed but steady beneath the paramedic's care. "He wasn't breathing, so I did what I learned at school," she said softly. Grace's tears spilled freely as she wrapped her arms around Mia. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle rolled away flashing red lights, the crowd that had gathered around the garden fell silent, then erupted into murmured applause. Some guests reached out to pat Mia on the back. Others asked her name and knelt down to introduce themselves, praising her calm courage. A few reporters approached, microphones poised, but Mrs. Delgado's face appeared in the doorway before them, gently guiding them back and saying, "She's just a child who helped in an emergency. Please give her space." Mia watched the ambulance's taillights fade into the night. Her small hands twisted together at her sides as adrenaline slowly drained away, leaving behind a sleepy ache. Grace held her close, whispering soothing words and promising that she would speak with someone about how brave Mia had been. The gentle music from the gala drifted to their ears again, a soft requiem for what had just passed, an ordinary evening transformed by a moment of quiet heroism. Mia's heart raced with so many feelings: relief that Andrew was alive, awe at what she had managed, pride in her own courage, and a curious sense that her world, once simple and safe, had just grown a little bigger. Mia's small hands trembled as she knelt beside the tall man in the dark suit. The garden lanterns above cast a soft glow on his still form, and the gentle murmur of the gala faded away into a hush of concern. All around her, guests froze in place, mouths open in alarm. But Mia did not hesitate. She remembered every word of the first aid lesson she had been so proud to learn just weeks before. The first step, her teacher had said, was to check if the person was breathing. Mia gently tilted the man's head back, careful not to hurt him, and held her ear close to his mouth. She could not feel his breath. Panic fluttered in her chest, but she pushed it aside. She had to act. Mia glanced over at the pool of water, resting on a silver tray nearby. Someone had placed it there for guests to refresh themselves. She turned back to the man and called out, "Does anyone have a phone? Call 911 right now." Her voice was clear and firm, surprising even herself. A security guard snapped out of his initial shock, darted to his belt and fished out his phone. He pounded the emergency number and spoke rapidly. "We need an ambulance at the Carlisle Gala." Man collapsed, not breathing. Mia took a steadying breath. The next step was chest compressions. She knelt on the damp grass, feeling tiny droplets settle on her knees. Using 2 fingers, she pressed down on the center of his chest, pushing hard and fast. 1, 2, 1, 2, just as she had practiced. Her small frame quivered as she counted each press under her breath. Even though her arms shook, she felt a fierce determination. Each push was like a promise. She would not give up on this man. Behind her, a soft voice said, "Good job, sweetie." Mia turned to see an off-duty nurse hurrying toward her, badge still pinned to her lapel. The nurse was tall and calm, her crisp white coat flapping slightly as she knelt beside Mia. "You've started CPR correctly," she whispered, placing her hands over Mia's to guide the motion. Mia exhaled in relief, grateful for the help. Together, they continued the compressions in perfect rhythm, their joined efforts a steady heartbeat in the still night. Not far away, the security guard was pacing anxiously. He spoke into the phone, in short bursts, giving precise directions. "We're by the East Garden gate next to the fountain. Yes, come quickly." Mia felt a knot of fear twist in her stomach as she counted. 1, 2, 1, 2. But she kept going. The night air smelled of damp grass and fallen cherry petals. Somewhere behind her, a little girl's paintbrush lay forgotten on the ground, its bristles splayed and covered in yellow paint. A sudden wail of sirens cut through the quiet. Mia's heart soared. Help was here. Paramedics burst through the garden gate, their uniforms bright against the dark walkway. 2 of them ran forward, dragging a stretcher behind them. One knelt and snapped on rubber gloves. The other lifted a small metal case. The nurse rose gracefully and stepped back, handing Mia a gentle nod. "You did amazing," she said, her eyes warm with gratitude. The paramedics worked swiftly. One placed an oxygen mask over the man's face while the other checked his pulse. Their practiced hands moved with ease and confidence. Mia watched, breath held as they signaled to each other. Then, as if by magic, the man's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Relief flooded through Mia, and her knees finally gave way. She sank back onto her heels, her small body exhausted but triumphant. "He's breathing," one paramedic announced. "Let's get him on the stretcher." They lifted the man with gentle care, placing him on the padded surface. Mia scrambled to her feet, brushing grass from her knees, and stepped back respectfully. The stretcher glided toward the waiting ambulance. Mia's mother, Grace, appeared at the gate, her face pale and eyes wide. She rushed forward, but the paramedics gently held her back until they had secured the man inside. Grace dropped to her, knees beside Mia, wrapping her arms around her daughter in a tight embrace. "Oh, Mia, you were so brave," she whispered, her voice cracking. Mia leaned into her mother's warmth, tears of relief and pride mingling on her cheeks. She wrapped her arms around Grace, feeling the steady rise and fall of her mother's chest. "I just did what I learned," she murmured, her voice small but sure. Guests had gathered behind them, murmuring in admiration. Some offered silent thumbs up or soft applause. A few reporters edged closer, cameras and microphones at the ready, but a calm authority figure in a dark suit waved them back. "Let her rest," he said firmly. It was Andrew Carlisle's personal assistant, her eyes full of gratitude. "She saved his life. Let's give her some space." Mia's small hand found a spot on her mother's sleeve, and she nodded. Grace guided her away from the gate, wrapping her free arm around Mia's shoulders. As they walked back toward the children's corner, Mia's legs felt like jelly, but her heart felt strangely light. The lanterns overhead glimmered like stars, and somewhere a soft note of music drifted through the night air. Once they were seated at the little table by the easel, Grace brushed stray petals from Mia's hair. "Sweetheart, what happened out there?" she asked gently. Mia closed her eyes and took a deep breath, then told her mother every detail: how she checked for breathing, how she asked for help, how she pressed with her 2 fingers, and how the nurse and paramedics arrived. She recounted the moment the man began to breathe again, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. Grace listened, nodding and occasionally wiping her own tears. When Mia finished, her mother pulled her into another hug. "You were amazing," she said again. "Your teacher will be so proud." Mia thought of Mrs. Delgado's gentle voice and her bright amber eyes. She felt a swell of pride at knowing she had done something truly important, beyond any painting she could create. The assistant returned a moment later with 2 glasses of water. He knelt beside Mia, offering her a small gesture of thanks. "Thank you," he said softly. "He's in good hands now because of you." Mia accepted the water with a shy smile. She sipped slowly, the cool liquid soothing her dry throat. As the gala resumed its gentle hum, people drifted back to their conversations and appetizers. But something had changed in the air, a quiet respect for the little girl who had stepped forward when everyone else froze. Mia glanced back toward the fountain gate, imagining the man on the stretcher arriving at the hospital. She wondered if he would remember her hands on his chest, pressing with all the courage she could muster. Later that night, as Mia and Grace packed up their things to leave, colleagues from her mother's volunteer group approached. They fussed over Mia, asking about her painting and praising her bravery. One of them, a woman with kind eyes, reached into her bag and pulled out a small silver heart-shaped locket. "For you," she said, fastening it around Mia's neck, "to remind you always of how courageous you are." Mia's breath caught. As she touched the cool metal, the chain resting lightly against her collarbone. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, Grace held Mia's hand tightly. The city lights sparkled in the distance and the gentle hum of traffic filled their ears. "You did something incredible tonight," Grace said. "You saved a life." Mia looked up at the sky where clouds drifted softly across the moon. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet thank you to whatever had given her the courage to act. In that moment, she felt a new kind of confidence take root, a belief that even the smallest person could make the biggest difference. And though she was just 6 years old, Mia knew that this night would forever be the moment her life truly began. The next morning, the world seemed to have shifted beneath Mia's feet. As she and her mother stepped out of their small blue car into the parking lot of Lincoln Park Elementary, cameras and reporters were already waiting. Bright lights flashed, and questions flew faster than she could catch them. "How do you feel, Mia? Are you excited to be a hero? Can you show us how you did CPR?" Mia's hand tightened around her mother's, and Grace squeezed back with a proud smile. Together they navigated the crowd, Mia's heart fluttering like a trapped butterfly. She had painted hundreds of hills and skies, but nothing quite prepared her for being the center of attention in real life. By midday, local news stations had aired the story. Little Mia Thompson, age 6, had saved billionaire Andrew Carlisle with life-saving chest compressions during a gala. The clip showed her small fingers pressing on his chest, her face set with determination. Viewers across Chicago gasped and applauded. Social media lit up with praise, hearts, and thumbs-up icons. Our city's youngest hero and CPR champion were just a few of the labels splashed across screens. At school, teachers whispered excitedly in the hallway and students pressed up against classroom doors to catch a glimpse of her. Even Principal Ramirez, a usually stern figure, beamed as he shook Mia's hand in the gym, calling her an inspiration. Meanwhile, Andrew Carlisle was in the hospital, recovering steadily. He insisted on meeting Mia and her mother as soon as he could walk without assistance. When the day came, he was wheeled into a private room filled with white flowers and warm lights. Mia stood beside the doorway, clutching the silver heart-shaped locket the gala assistant had given her. Andrew's eyes lit up when he saw her. With the help of a nurse, he sat up and reached out. "Thank you, Mia," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You saved my life. I can never repay you, but I can honor you." He pressed a small velvet box into her hands. Mia opened it to find a shiny medal inscribed with her name and the words, "Bravery Beyond Years." Tears pricked at her eyes as she pinned it to her dress. Word of the meeting spread quickly. Newspapers ran feature stories with photos of Mia, smiling beside Andrew's hospital bed. The headline read, "A girl and a billionaire, united by courage." Cardiologists and first aid advocates praised her quick action, but what gained the most attention was Andrew's promise. He would start a new charitable fund in her name. Promises turned into plans within days. Andrew's public relations team announced the Mia Thompson First Aid Foundation, aimed at equipping schools across the country with CPR training kits and basic emergency equipment. Mia's simple act of kindness would become a nationwide movement, teaching children everywhere how to save lives just as she had. In the week that followed, invitations poured in. A national pediatric health organization asked her to be their youngest ever honorary ambassador. She would visit hospitals, attend conferences, and appear on morning television shows, always with her mother at her side. Scholarship offers arrived from local private schools, colleges she would not attend for another decade, promising full tuition from kindergarten through university. Mia and Grace spent evenings reading through letters, marveling at the generosity pouring in. While the weight of it all felt heavy at times, they both understood that these opportunities came from a single moment of bravery. Back in her neighborhood, life took on a new rhythm. The once quiet Thompson home buzzed with phone calls from local businesses wanting to sponsor Mia's foundation efforts. The community center organized first aid workshops in her honor, led by volunteer paramedics who treated her like a celebrity instructor. Every Sunday picnic now included a small station where children practiced chest compressions on training mannequins. Mia would demonstrate the correct hand placement, her small frame bending over the dummy with serious focus. Parents watched with gratitude as she encouraged each child with a bright smile and gentle praise. Despite the whirlwind of attention, Mia stayed grounded by returning to her routines. Each morning, she still helped Grace pack lunches, traded jokes with Buddy the Terrier, and boarded the yellow school bus with Lucas and Sophia. In art class, she painted more hills and skies, but now she added small symbols of hope, a red cross, a tiny heartbeat line woven among the daisies. Mrs. Delgado quieted the class one afternoon to announce that Mia's foundation would donate new easels and art supplies to the school. The children cheered and Mia's cheeks warmed. Even with her medal shining on her dress, she felt happiest when she could share her creativity with friends. At home, Grace adjusted her work schedule to be with Mia more often. She knew her daughter had stepped into a world far bigger than their small suburb, but she also wanted to preserve the magic of being 6. They set aside Saturday mornings for painting and storytelling, free from cameras or speeches. Sometimes, Grace would catch Mia, staring at her medal or at a news clip on the television screen and ask, "Do you feel proud?" Mia would nod slowly, then add with a shy smile, "I just hope people remember to learn CPR too." In those moments, Grace saw how deeply her daughter cared about helping others, far beyond the excitement of being in the spotlight. As summer approached, Andrew's team invited Mia and Grace back to the gala grounds, this time as honored guests rather than spectators. The garden courtyard looked much the same. Lanterns hanging from tree branches, a calm fountain drifting water into its basin. But now, a new sign stood by the entrance. Mia Thompson First Aid Training Station. Volunteers in crisp uniforms demonstrated CPR and children practiced on mannequins with Mia guiding them. Andrew greeted them at the gate, his step steadier and his smile brighter. He led Mia to a special corner where a small ceremony would thank the donors and introduce the foundation's first major gift, hundreds of CPR kits for underfunded schools. Mia watched from her mother's side as Andrew spoke about how one child's courage could save a life and then spark change for thousands more. When it was her turn, she stepped forward with surprising confidence and spoke into the microphone. "I hope every kid learns how to help someone when they really need it," she said. The applause rose like a wave, and for a moment, Mia closed her eyes against the brightness, feeling both small and infinite. That evening, as they drove home under a sky painted with pink and orange dusk, Mia leaned her head against the window, her medal resting against her chest. Grace glanced over and asked softly, "Are you happy, sweetheart?" Mia opened her eyes, staring at the clouds drifting by, and whispered, "Yes, but I'm most happy when I know someone else can be saved because they learned what I learned." Grace reached over and squeezed her hand. In the growing twilight, they rode on in comforting silence, the world outside vast and full of promise, all because a 6-year-old girl had dared to act when it mattered most. When autumn leaves began to fall, Mia realized that life after that night was filled with new promise. She still woke early, slipping on her pink slippers, but now her morning routine included checking her little first aid kit on the shelf beside her bed. She made sure the bandages were neat and the gloves untouched. Each time she opened the kit, she remembered the feeling of knowing exactly what to do when someone needed help. Even though she was still 6, the world around her felt a bit brighter and safer because she carried that knowledge in her small but steady hands. At school, her classmates couldn't stop talking about her bravery. Mrs. Delgado invited Mia to speak at a special assembly, where she described in her own gentle voice how anyone, even a small child, could learn to save a life. The school decided to hold a fundraiser to buy first aid training kits for every classroom. Mia helped hang handmade posters in the hallways, bright drawings of hearts, bandages, and smiling faces, each signed by a student who had promised to learn CPR alongside her. The excitement bubbled through every grade, from kindergarten all the way up to 5th grade. On the day of the fundraiser, the cafeteria transformed into a festival of caring. Long tables displayed cupcakes iced with red crosses and cookies shaped like tiny ambulances. Next to them, a row of mini mannequins waited, their plastic chests ready for little hands to practice chest compressions. Mia moved from table to table, kneeling beside friends as they pressed firmly down. 1, 2, 1, 2, just as she had learned. She encouraged each child with a bright smile and whispered, "You're doing great." The room buzzed with proud chatter as parents watched their children learn a skill that could change someone's life. Word of the school's event spread through the neighborhood. Local businesses donated supplies, a hardware store gave gloves and antiseptic wipes, a bakery sent extra cupcakes, and a print shop made large banners that fluttered outside the school doors. Community volunteers showed up early to help set up, wearing t-shirts that read, "Mia's Heroes." Even the local newspaper sent a photographer, who snapped pictures of Mia showing her classmates how to place 2 fingers on the mannequin's chest. By the end of the day, the fundraiser had gathered enough money to buy training kits for every classroom in the district, and more. Meanwhile, Andrew Carlisle kept his promise. He officially launched the Mia Thompson First Aid Fund at a small ceremony in the City Hall. Mia and Grace sat in the front row, as Andrew spoke about how a child's quick thinking had changed his life and would now help thousands of children learn to save others. He announced grants to underfunded schools, partnerships with hospitals for nurse-led workshops, and an online portal with videos of Mia demonstrating basic steps. Seeing the smile on Mia's face as she stood beside him, metal shining on her dress, warmed the hearts of everyone in the room. Soon, Mia began receiving letters and drawings from children in other states, and even from other countries, thanking her for inspiring them to learn first aid. One letter came from a girl in Texas who practiced chest compressions on her little brother's stuffed bear until her arms hurt. Another came from a boy in Japan who translated Mia's story into his school newspaper. Mia spread out the colorful drawings on her bedroom floor, feeling amazed that so many children cared about helping others just like she did. Each picture reminded her that her simple act had sparked something much bigger than she ever imagined it. Home, Grace and Mia made a new tradition. Every Sunday afternoon, they packed a small backpack with Mia's first aid kit and a few art supplies, then walked to the neighborhood park. Under the shade of the old oak tree, Mia set up her easel and painted scenes of children helping each other, with bandages, rescue dogs, and smiling hearts, while Grace reviewed the first aid steps with her. They took turns quizzing each other. How do you check for breathing? Where do you put your hands for compressions? With every answer, Mia felt her confidence grow, knowing that practice would help her stay ready whenever someone needed help. Though she was still a child, with crayons and playground games on her mind, Mia began to dream of becoming a doctor or a paramedic when she grew up. She imagined herself in a white coat, rushing into an emergency room or riding in an ambulance with sirens wailing. But even as her dreams soared, she stayed grounded in the moment, knowing that today's knowledge could save a life next week, or even tomorrow. She tucked her ambitions into her heart, alongside her courage, and whispered, "I can do this," whenever she felt a flicker of doubt. As winter approached and snow began to dust the rooftops, Mia's story continued to inspire. Teachers in nearby towns invited her to virtual classrooms, where she talked about courage and compassion to students who sat wrapped in blankets at their desks. Her voice crackled through computer speakers, clear and steady as she guided them through the steps of first aid. During these online visits, Mia learned that bravery wasn't about size or age. It was about caring enough to act, no matter how small you might feel. Each night, as Mia drifted off to sleep under her star-patterned blanket, she thought about the many lives that could be saved because she had learned to help. She pictured classrooms filled with children practicing chest compressions, ambulances racing to emergencies, and families reunited because someone had acted quickly. Her heart swelled with quiet pride and gentle hope. And though she was just 6 years old, Mia knew deep inside that this was only the beginning of her journey, a journey that would continue to grow, one heartbeat at a time.